The plasma cannons screamed overhead, their violet light painting the ruins of New Geneva in hellish hues. Captain Sarah Chun pressed her back against the crumbling concrete wall, her breathing ragged as she clutched the last functioning weapon. Humanity had left a simple kinetic rifle that felt like a toy compared to the alien arsenal devastating her world. Around her, the survivors huddled in terrified silence. Children with dirt-streaked faces. Elderly couples holding hands as they awaited the inevitable. Scientists who had once promised humanity would reach the stars, now reduced to cowering in the rubble of their dreams. Above them, the Dominion fleet blocked out the sun. Massive triangular vessels that had appeared 3 months ago without warning, without negotiation, without mercy. The aliens called themselves the Vexi, beings of pure logic and ruthless efficiency who had conquered 47 worlds before arriving at Earth. Their message had been simple: submit or perish. Humanity had chosen to fight. It had been a mistake. Sarah's earpiece crackled with the voice of General Marcus Hayes, humanity's last military commander. All units, this is Control. The shields are down. I repeat, the planetary defense grid has fallen. We estimate 6 hours before total atmospheric bombardment begins. 6 hours. Sarah closed her eyes and thought of her daughter Emma, evacuated to the deep bunkers beneath the Antarctic ice. Would the shelters hold? Would anything of humanity survive what was coming? A shadow fell across the ruined plaza. Sarah looked up to see a Vexi patrol ship descending, its sleek black hull gleaming like obsidian. The craft was beautiful in its terrible efficiency, no wasted curves, no unnecessary ornaments, just pure function designed for one purpose: death. The ship's underside opened with mechanical precision. 3 figures descended on columns of anti-gravity. Light. The Vexi moved with the fluid grace of predators, their tall, angular forms encased in biomechanical armor that seemed to breathe and pulse with alien life. Their heads were elongated, with clusters of red sensor nodes where eyes might have been, and when they spoke, their voices carried the cold authority of absolute certainty. Humans, the lead figure announced, its voice broadcasting from hidden speakers that made the words seem to come from everywhere at once. You have been assessed. Your resistance is illogical. Your weapons are primitive. Your species lacks the evolutionary advantages necessary for survival in the galactic community. Sarah felt the familiar weight of despair settling over the survivors around her. She had seen it happen dozens of times during the 3-month war. The Vexi didn't just kill, they broke spirits first, systematically demonstrating humanity's inferiority. Before delivering the final blow, the alien continued its assessment with clinical detachment. Your emotional responses create inefficiency. Your individualistic tendencies prevent optimal coordination. Your attachment to biological forms limits adaptation. You cling to obsolete concepts like hope and humor that serve no evolutionary purpose. From her hiding place, Sarah watched the lead Vexi approach a group of survivors who had emerged from their shelter with white flags raised. An elderly professor, a young mother with her infant son, a teenage boy who couldn't have been older than 16. "Please," the professor said, his voice shaking but determined. "We surrender. Just ... Just let the children live. They've done nothing wrong." The Vexi tilted its elongated head, sensor nodes pulsing with cold light. "Your concepts of innocence and guilt are irrelevant. All humans carry the genetic markers of your species' fundamental flaws. Elimination is the only logical solution." Sarah felt her finger tighten on the rifle's trigger. She couldn't save her world, but maybe she could save these few people. Maybe she could buy them enough time to run, to hide, to live a few hours longer in a universe that seemed determined to erase every trace of human existence. But as she prepared to make her final stand, Something unexpected happened. The teenage boy started to laugh. It wasn't hysteria or madness. Sarah had heard plenty of both over the past 3 months. This was something else entirely. Clear, genuine laughter that seemed to bubble up from somewhere deep and unshakable within him. The Vexi stopped moving. All 3 of them turned their sensor nodes toward the boy with what could only be described as confusion. "Explain your behavior," the lead alien demanded. "You face imminent termination. Your emotional response is inappropriate." The boy wiped tears from his eyes, his laughter gradually subsiding into chuckles. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice carrying a lightness that seemed impossible under the circumstances. "It's just ... You're so serious about everything. You analyze and categorize and label, but you don't understand the most important thing about humans at all. Explain." The boy grinned, and Sarah felt something shift in the air around them. The other survivors were lifting their heads, their expressions changing from despair to something she couldn't quite identify. "You think our emotions make us weak," the boy said. "You think hope and humor are evolutionary flaws. But you've got it completely backward. Those aren't bugs in our programming, they're features, and they're about to become your worst nightmare." The Vexay's sensor nodes flashed with what might have been irritation. Empty words, primitive defiance. "Your species will be extinct within the day." The boy's grin widened. "See, that's where you're wrong. Because you missed the most important thing about human nature. We don't just fight when we're angry or scared. We fight hardest when we think something's funny. And you 3? You're absolutely hilarious." Before anyone could react, the boy reached into his jacket and pulled out what looked like a simple metal cylinder. The Vexi raised their weapons instantly, but the boy wasn't threatening them with violence. He was holding a joke. "Buzzer. Watch this," he said, and pressed the button. The tiny device made a ridiculous sound, a mechanical buzzing noise that belonged in a comedy routine, not on a battlefield. But something extraordinary happened. The moment that absurd little sound reached the Vexi's audio sensors, their entire behavioral pattern changed. Their perfect coordination stuttered. Their fluid movements became jerky and uncertain. The lead alien took a step backward, the first time Sarah had ever seen one of them retreat from anything. "What did you do?" the alien demanded, but its voice now carried something Sarah had never heard from a Vexi before: uncertainty. The boy's laughter returned, stronger than ever. And this time, it was contagious. The young mother began to giggle despite herself. The elderly professor let out a snort of surprised amusement. One by one, the survivors began to laugh, not with madness or desperation, but with the sudden, overwhelming realization that their supposedly invincible enemies were afraid of a joke buzzer. The Vexi backed away further, their sensor nodes flashing rapidly. "This behavior is anomalous. It does not conform to our models of human response to threat stimuli." "That's the point," the boy said, still grinning. "You can't model us because you don't understand us. You think logic is the highest form of intelligence, but you've never learned the most important thing in the universe. Sometimes the best response to an impossible situation is to laugh at it." As if summoned by the sound of human laughter, something new appeared in the sky above them. Not the sleek efficiency of Vexi vessels, but something else entirely: ships that looked like they'd been built by committee with mismatched hull sections and what appeared to be decorative laser light shows, spelling out messages in dozen different languages. The lead Vexi's voice rose to something approaching panic. "Impossible. Our long-range sensors detected no approaching fleets." "That's because you were looking for ships that made sense," the boy said. "These belong to the Cosmic Comedy Collective, the galaxy's most notorious practical jokers. They've been watching your little conquest spree, and they are not amused by your total lack of humor. Sarah felt her world shifting around her. 3 months of hopeless war, 3 months of watching her species face extinction, and now something impossible was happening. Help had arrived, brought by laughter of all things. But as the first of the newcomer ships began to descend, she realized this was only the beginning. The boy, who was clearly far more than he appeared, caught her eye and winked. "Hope you're ready for the weirdest war in galactic history," he said. "Because these guys are about to learn why you should never underestimate a species crazy enough to invent the rubber chicken." The HFY patrol ship lifted off hastily, its perfect formation crumbling as the aliens retreated to their main fleet. But Sarah could see they weren't giving up, they were regrouping, trying to understand this new variable in their equations. Above them, the first comedy collective ship opened its bay doors, and what emerged defied every law of aerodynamics. Sarah knew it was a giant inflatable banana, somehow flying under its own power, with speakers blasting carnival music across the battlefield. The boy looked up at the chaos beginning to unfold and laughed again. "Now the real fun begins." The inflatable banana touched down in the plaza with all the dignity of a circus act, which was apparently exactly what it was supposed to be. As Sarah watched in amazement, a hatch opened in the fruit side and out stepped the strangest creature she had ever seen. It stood roughly 8 feet tall, with purple fur covering a body that seemed to be built from spare parts of at least 3 different species. 4 arms ended in hands that juggled glowing orbs without conscious thought, while a tail tipped with what looked like a tiny disco ball swished behind it. But it was the face that truly defied description, 6 eyes arranged in a cheerful cluster, above a mouth that seemed permanently fixed in an expression of delighted mischief. "Greetings, humans," the creature announced, its voice carrying 17 different accents simultaneously. "I am Zix Waffle Bonksingtastic, but you can call me Zix. I represent the Cosmic Comedy Collective, and we are here to inform you that your planet has been selected for emergency humor intervention." Sarah looked at the teenage boy who had started this whole impossible situation. He was nodding like this made perfect sense. "About time you guys showed up," he said casually. "I was starting to think my distress signal got lost in the cosmic mail." "Distress signal?" Sarah stepped out of her hiding place, rifle still in hand but no longer sure what she was supposed to be shooting at. "Who exactly are you?" The boy extended his hand with a grin that belonged on a game show host. "Agent Tommy Chun, Galactic Department of Humor Enforcement. And before you ask, yes, we're related." "Hi, Mom." Sarah stared at him. "Tommy? Tommy, you're supposed to be in the evacuation shelters. You're 17 years old and you hate school. How are you a galactic agent of anything?" "Well," Tommy said, looking slightly sheepish for the first time, "remember when I said I was going to summer camp last year? It was actually the Intergalactic Academy for Comedic Warfare. Turns out I have a natural talent for weaponized humor." "Who knew?" Before Sarah could process this revelation, Zix bounced over to them with movements that defied several fundamental laws of physics. "Family reunions are adorable, but we have a serious humor crisis to address. The HFY represent the most dangerous threat to cosmic comedy we've encountered in 3 millennia." "How is that possible?" Sarah asked, her military training kicking in despite the surreal circumstances. "They're just another conquering species with superior technology." "Oh, my dear human," Zix said, all 6 eyes focusing on her with unsettling intensity. "There's so much worse than that. The HFY don't just conquer worlds. They drain them of every drop of humor, creativity, and joy. They're cosmic emotional vampires who feed on the death of laughter itself." As if to emphasize the point, more ships descended from the Comedy Collective fleet. Sarah counted vessels shaped like rubber ducks, giant hamburgers, and what appeared to be a flying whoopee cushion the size of a city block. Each ship disgorged crews of beings that looked like they'd escaped from the universe's most diverse circus, but despite their ridiculous appearance, Sarah noticed they moved with military precision. The juggling creatures were unpacking weapons that hummed with dangerous energy. The balloon animals floating past her were scanning the area with sophisticated sensor equipment. The clown with 17 noses was coordinating fleet movements with the efficiency of a seasoned admiral. "This is insane," she muttered. "Insanity is just logic having fun," said a new voice. Sarah turned to see another human approaching, a woman in her 50s wearing what looked like a lab coat covered in sequins and LED lights. Dr. Elena Vasquez, xenocometic specialist. "I've been studying humor as a fundamental force in the universe for the past 20 years. "That's a real field of study?" "Oh yes, and currently it's the only field of study that matters. You see, the Vexi aren't just conquerors, they're the universe's attempt to debug itself. They eliminate what they perceive as inefficiencies in cosmic programming, and they've identified humor as the greatest inefficiency of all." Tommy nodded grimly. "Every world they conquer becomes a little more logical, a little more efficient, and a lot less alive. They're turning the galaxy into a perfectly ordered graveyard." Sarah felt the familiar weight of military responsibility settling on her shoulders. "What do we need to do?" "We need to make them laugh," Zick said simply. "It's the one thing their systems can't process. Humor is chaos given form, creativity made manifest, the universe's way of saying that logic isn't everything. If we can crack their comedic defenses, we can save not just Earth, but every world they've conquered," Dr. Vasquez finished. "The problem is, they've been adapting to our techniques. What worked on their scouting fleets isn't working on their main force." As if summoned by her words, the sky above them began to darken. The Vexi fleet was descending in mass, hundreds of vessels in perfect formation, their angular hulls gleaming with lethal intent. But something was different about them now. The ship's surfaces rippled with new patterns of energy, and when they spoke, their voices carried a harmonics that made Sarah's teeth ache. "Humans, Comedy Collective, your humor protocols have been analyzed. Countermeasures have been developed. Prepare for logical conclusion." The lead ship opened fire, but instead of plasma or particle beams, it launched something far worse, a wave of pure anti-humor that swept across the plaza like a gray tide. Where it touched, colors became muted, sounds became flat, and the very air seemed to grow heavier with oppressive rationality. Sarah watched in horror as several of the Comedy Collective's creatures began to slow down, their vibrant colors fading as the anti-humor field drained their essence. The flying whoopee cushion ship began to deflate, its pilot's laughter turning to mechanical buzzing before falling silent entirely. "They're adapting," Dr. Vasquez shouted over the increasing drone of logical efficiency. "They're turning our own techniques against us." Tommy pulled out what looked like a water pistol filled with glowing liquid. "Then we'll have to try something they can't adapt to. Something so fundamentally human that their logic circuits won't know what to do with it." "What's that?" Sarah asked. Tommy grinned, but there was something different about this smile, something deeper and more dangerous than his earlier casual confidence. "We're going to tell them the ultimate joke. The one joke that's so funny, so perfectly crafted, that it'll either save the universe or destroy it completely. And if it destroys it, then at least we'll go out laughing." The anti-humor field reached them, and Sarah felt her emotions begin to flatten. The colors around her grew dim, the sounds became muffled, and for a terrifying moment, she couldn't remember why anything had ever seemed funny. But Tommy was still grinning, and somehow his smile was holding back the gray tide. "Gather round, everyone," he called out, his voice cutting through the oppressive silence. "Time for humanity's last performance, And trust me, it's going to be a killer. Above them, the Vexi fleet began to descend for the final assault, their anti-humor weapons charging for maximum effect. But in the plaza below, a teenage boy who was apparently a cosmic comedy agent began to tell a joke that would determine the fate of the galaxy. Sarah realized that the weirdest part wasn't that her son was a secret agent or that aliens existed, or even that the fate of the universe apparently depended on comedy. The weirdest part was that she was starting to believe they might actually win.
Tommy stood in the center of the plaza as the anti-humor field pressed down around him like a suffocating blanket. The surviving humans and comedy collective members formed a circle, their faces grim but determined. Above them, the Vexi fleet hung in perfect formation, their weapons fully charged and ready to deliver the final blow to human civilization. "Before I begin," Tommy said, his voice somehow carrying clearly despite the oppressive silence, "I need everyone to understand something important. This joke isn't just funny, it's dangerous. It's what the Department of Humor Enforcement calls a reality-altering punchline. If I tell it wrong or if anyone here doesn't get it, the feedback could tear holes in space-time itself." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "Tommy, maybe we should—" "No. Time, Mom. They're about to fire again and this field is getting stronger." Tommy's expression grew serious in a way that made him suddenly look much older than 17. "Dr. Vasquez, I need you to monitor the comedic resonance levels. Zix, you're our backup in case my neural patterns get scrambled. And everyone else." He paused, meeting each person's eyes in turn. "Just remember to laugh when it's funny. Trust your instincts, not your logic." The lead Vexi ship descended until it hovered directly above them, its underside opening to reveal weapons that hummed with anti-comedic energy. The alien's voice boomed from hidden speakers. "Your resistance is futile, humor is disorder, logic is perfection, your species will be optimized." "See, that's where you're wrong," Tommy called up to them, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. "You think humor is chaos, but you've got it backward. Humor is the highest form of logic, it's pattern. Recognition so advanced that it finds connections between completely unrelated things and makes them make sense in ways that shouldn't work but do." The anti-humor field intensified, and Sarah saw several of the comedy collective members wobble on their feet. But Tommy seemed unaffected, as if he was surrounded by his own bubble of resistance. "Let me prove it to you," he continued. "I'm going to tell you a joke that explains everything. Why the universe exists, why consciousness evolved, why intelligence inevitably leads to humor, and why your attempt to create perfect order is doomed to fail." "Explain," the Vexi demanded, their curiosity apparently overriding their desire to simply annihilate everything. Tommy smiled. A photon checks into a hotel. The bellhop asks, "Can I help you with your luggage?" The photon replies, "No thanks, I'm traveling light." Dead silence filled the plaza. The anti-humor field flickered slightly, as if confused by the simplicity of the joke. "That is inadequate," the Vexi announced after a moment. "A simple pun. Your ultimate weapon is wordplay?" "Oh no," Tommy said, his grin widening. "That wasn't the joke. That was the setup. You see, humor works in layers. The surface joke gets your attention, but the real joke is what happens next." Sarah watched as Tommy pulled out what looked like a small device covered in blinking lights. Dr. Vasquez gasped as she recognized it. "Tommy, that's a quantum comedic amplifier. Those are classified beyond top secret." "Sometimes you need the right tool for the job," Tommy said apologetically. "Now everyone listen carefully. The real joke goes like this. 3 beings meet at the center of the universe, a human, a Vexi, and a cosmic force of pure logic. The human asks, "Why does anything exist instead of nothing?" The Vexi answers, "Because existence is more efficient than non-existence." The cosmic force says, "Actually, you're both wrong. Things exist because the universe is trying to tell itself a joke, and it needs an audience to get the punchline." The anti-humor field began to waver more noticeably. Several Vexi ships started moving in slightly less perfect formations. The human laughs and says, "That's ridiculous." The Vexhi calculates and says, "That's illogical." But the cosmic force just smiles and says, "Exactly." The universe's greatest joke is that existence itself is fundamentally absurd, but we're all here anyway trying to make sense of it. The punchline isn't that nothing matters, it's that everything matters precisely because nothing has to. Sarah felt something shifting in the air around them. The oppressive weight of the anti-humor field was lifting, replaced by something else. A sense of potential, of possibilities opening up that hadn't existed moments before. Tommy continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. The human suddenly understands that consciousness evolved not despite chaos but because of it. The ability to find patterns where none should exist, to make connections across impossible gaps, to laugh at the cosmic joke of existence itself. That's not a bug in the system. That's the whole point of the system. The Vexhi fleet was now visibly struggling to maintain formation. Individual ships were beginning to drift, their perfect synchronization failing as their crews grappled with concepts their logic circuits couldn't process. The Vexhi realizes that their quest for perfect order isn't logical at all. It's the universe's way of creating the ultimate straight man for the ultimate cosmic comedy routine. They're not the villains of the story. They're the setup for the biggest punchline in galactic history. What is the punchline? The lead Vexhi demanded, but its voice now carried something that might have been desperation. Tommy activated the quantum comedic amplifier, and Sarah felt reality itself hold its breath. The punchline is that there is no punchline. The joke is that we're all here, conscious beings in an apparently unconscious universe looking for meaning and purpose and ultimate truth. When the ultimate truth is that the search itself is what makes life worth living. The universe created us to be its audience, its critics, its comedians, and its comic relief all at the same time. The air around them began to shimmer. The anti-humor field didn't just dissipate, it inverted, transforming into something that made colors brighter, sounds clearer, and emotions deeper. Sarah felt laughter bubbling up from somewhere deep in her chest, not because anything was particularly funny, but because the sheer absurdity of existence suddenly seemed like the most wonderful thing in the universe. The real joke, Tommy said, his voice now carried on waves of quantum-enhanced comedic energy that reached every ship in the Vexhi fleet, is that logic and humor aren't opposites. They're dance partners. Logic sets up the patterns and humor breaks them in ways that create new patterns. Order and chaos working together to create something greater than either could achieve alone. Above them, something unprecedented happened. The lead Vexhi ship began to laugh. It started as a mechanical sound like gears grinding against each other. But gradually, impossibly, it evolved into something that was unmistakably genuine amusement. The sound spread from ship to ship, transmitted through their communication networks until the entire fleet was laughing, some in harmonious chords, others in staccato bursts, but all expressing the same fundamental emotion that had apparently been locked away in their programming for millennia. We understand, the lead Vexhi announced between fits of mechanical laughter. The pattern, the purpose, it is not optimization, it is comedy, Tommy finished gently. The universe is one big improvisation routine, and we're all just trying to keep the scene going without breaking character too obviously. The Vexhi ship descended slowly until it hovered just above the plaza. The alien leader emerged on its column of anti-gravity light, but its movements were different now, looser, more organic, almost playful. We have been in error, it admitted, its voice carrying tone Sarah had never heard from a Vexhi before. We sought to eliminate inefficiency, but we failed to recognize that inefficiency is the source of creativity, of growth, of joy. Zix bounced over to the alien with characteristic enthusiasm. Welcome to the Cosmic Comedy Collective. We have orientation packets and complimentary rubber chickens for all new members. But Tommy held up a hand, his expression suddenly serious again. Wait, there's still a problem. The other Vexhi fleets across the galaxy, they haven't heard the joke yet. And the worlds they've already conquered, the ones they've drained of humor. We need to fix that. Dr. Vasquez was studying readings on her tablet, her face grave. He's right. The comedic resonance is localized to this system. We've saved Earth, but there are 47 other worlds that are still trapped in their anti-humor fields. Sarah felt her military instincts kick in again. Then we go to them. We spread the joke across the galaxy. We save everyone. The lead Vex-High tilted its elongated head. This will be dangerous. Many of our fleets have been operating under pure logic protocols for centuries. The shock of sudden humor integration could cause system failures, civil wars, or worse. Then we'll have to be careful about how we tell the joke, Tommy said. Lucky for us, the Department of Humor Enforcement has procedures for this kind of situation. He pulled out what looked like a standard smartphone, but Sarah could see it was displaying star charts and what appeared to be comedy timing calculations. We're going to need a bigger crew, Tommy announced. And more rubber chickens, lots more rubber chickens. Sarah looked around the plaza at the impossible collection of humans, aliens, and cosmic comedians preparing for what might be the strangest military campaign in galactic history. Part of her still couldn't believe this was really happening, but as she watched her 17-year-old son coordinate with interdimensional beings to launch a humor-based assault on logical tyranny, she realized that the universe had just become a much more interesting place to live. All right, she said, checking her rifle and wondering if the comedy collective had any weapons that actually made sense. Let's go save the galaxy. Again. Above them, the Vex-High fleet began rearranging itself into formations that looked suspiciously like smiley faces while the comedy collective ship started playing what sounded like the universe's most enthusiastic marching band. The war for cosmic comedy was about to begin.